Andrew leaned back in his chair, the glow of the television flickering across the room as he sipped his whiskey. Sophia sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the screen. She'd been doing that a lot lately. Detached, always absorbed in something far away from their shared world. "Hey," Andrew said, trying to catch her attention. "What's got you so glued to that thing lately?" Sophia glanced up briefly, her expression unreadable. "Just work stuff. The gala is coming up, you know, lots to coordinate." The gala. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Every year they attended the charity event together, a tradition they'd upheld since they got married 8 years ago. Yet this time, Sophia had casually mentioned she'd be going alone, brushing off his offer to accompany her with an offhand excuse about needing to network. Andrew swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Why not let me come along? I could help out. Be your arm candy for the night." His tone was light, but his eyes watched her closely. Her response was immediate and dismissive. "It's not that kind of event, Andrew. I'll be busy running around, managing things. You'd be bored out of your mind." It wasn't like her to push him away so casually. Sophia had always thrived on appearances, and having Andrew by her side had been a point of pride. Now it was as if she didn't want him there. "What's so different this year?" he pressed, keeping his voice calm despite the tightening in his chest. She sighed, her irritation barely hidden. "Nothing's different. Can we not make a big deal out of this? I'm just saying it'll be easier if I handle this on my own." Andrew let it drop for now, but the way she avoided his gaze and her clipped tone left an itch he couldn't ignore. Sophia was hiding something, and Andrew was determined to find out. What? His best friend, Dominic Parker, had noticed the change in Sophia too. During their weekly basketball game, he broached the subject carefully. "Everything okay with you and Sophia?" Dominic asked, passing the ball. "She seemed pretty distant at the barbecue last weekend." Andrew caught the ball, hesitating before taking his shot. "I don't know, man. Something's off. She's been secretive about this charity gala. Doesn't want me there." Dominic frowned. "That's not like her. She usually loves showing you off." "Exactly," Andrew replied, watching the ball sail through the hoop. "And I'm going to find out why." A week before the gala, Andrew came home late from work to find Sophia in the bedroom trying on dresses. The sight was jarring, not because she was dressing up, but because of the extravagant gown she was wearing. Sleek black silk clung to her body like it was made for seduction, the slit running high up her thigh, leaving little to the imagination. "You expecting to walk the red carpet?" Andrew asked, leaning against the doorway. Sophia jumped, startled. "Jesus, Andrew, you scared me." She smoothed the dress down and avoided his eyes. "I just want to make a good impression. It's a high-profile event." Andrew's gaze narrowed. "And you need a dress like that for a bunch of philanthropists." Sophia rolled her eyes. "You wouldn't understand. Appearance matters at these things. Besides, I didn't ask for your opinion." Her tone was sharper than he expected, defensive. That night, as Sophia showered, Andrew checked her phone. It was locked as usual, but a notification flashed across the screen. Gregory Blackwood, a name he recognized as the CEO of the charity. The message preview was innocuous, just a meeting confirmation, but something about it made Andrew's jaw tighten. He slipped her phone back onto the nightstand just as she stepped out of the bathroom. The room filled with the scent of her floral body wash as she toweled her hair dry. Oblivious to his scrutiny, 2 nights later, Andrew's suspicions boiled over when he overheard Sophia on a late-night call in the kitchen. He stayed hidden in the shadowed hallway, straining to hear her hushed voice. "Don't worry, he doesn't suspect anything," she said, her words dripping with confidence. "Everything's set for the gala. We'll talk more there." Andrew's fists clenched. Whoever was on the other end of the line chuckled softly, though the words were too muffled to make out. Sophia's laughter followed, low and intimate. It was a sound that twisted in Andrew's gut when he hadn't heard directed at him in months. As she ended the call and headed upstairs, Andrew stayed rooted to the spot, his mind racing. He'd always trusted Sophia, but now the cracks in their marriage felt more like gaping chasms. Something was wrong, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the gala would be the key to uncovering it. But Sophia wasn't just going to reveal her secrets. If Andrew wanted answers, he'd have to take matters into his own hands. The next day, Andrew met Dominic for lunch. needing a sounding board for his growing suspicion. I think she's involved with someone, Andrew confided, his voice low. The CEO of that charity. Dominic's expression darkened. Gregory Blackwood. I've heard rumors about him. Not the most ethical guy. You need to be careful, Andrew. If you're right, this could get messy. I know, Andrew replied. But I need to be sure before I do anything. Andrew stared at the bank statements, splayed across his desk, their neat columns of numbers betraying Sophia's betrayal. His sharp eye for detail, honed through years in corporate finance, picked out the irregularities instantly. Transfers labeled as event planning expenses were diverted into an account under Sophia's name. The amounts were too large, too frequent to be legitimate. He traced the transactions back several months, each one forming a trail that led to the same destination. His hands clenched into fists as he noticed another pattern, payments lining up suspiciously close to her recent work trips and late nights. His mind buzzed with possibilities, each more damning than the last. Was she pocketing the money for herself, supporting Gregory Blackwood, the smug CEO who seemed all too familiar with Sophia? Or worse, funding a lifestyle she shared with someone else? Andrew stood abruptly, the chair screeching across the hardwood floor. He grabbed his keys, throwing on his jacket as he headed for the door. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to get them sitting at home. The charity's office was nestled in an upscale part of the city, a sleek building surrounded by manicured gardens. Andrew parked his car a block away, careful not to draw attention. He entered the lobby, blending in with the flow of visitors and staff. At the reception desk, a young woman smiled brightly at him. Welcome to the Blackwood Foundation. How can I help you? Andrew adjusted his tone to sound casual, even disarming. Good afternoon. I'm a potential donor considering a significant contribution. I was hoping to get some details about your gala, particularly the expenses involved. Receptionist hesitated but quickly recovered. Of course, let me connect you with our event coordinator. One moment, please. Minutes later, Andrew was led to a small meeting room where a clipboard-toting woman introduced herself as Melissa. She was eager to impress, launching into a detailed explanation of the gala's expenses. We try to keep everything as transparent as possible, Melissa said, sliding a folder across the table. Here's a breakdown of our costs for this year's event. Andrew skimmed the document, his heart racing as he compared the figures to what he'd seen in Sophia's account. The official expenses were significantly lower. The difference wasn't just a mistake. It was theft. Melissa's voice broke his focus. Is there anything else I can help you with, Mr. Reynolds? Andrew forced a polite smile. No, this is perfect. Thank you for your time. As he exited the building, a dark determination settled over him. Sophia wasn't just lying to him. She wasn't doing it alone. Evening, Andrew returned home to find Sophia in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She was dressed casually, but her makeup was meticulous, as though she were preparing for something. Late night again? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia glanced at him, her expression guarded. Just tying up some loose ends for the gala. Andrew crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. You've been putting a lot of effort into this event. It's important, she replied curtly, sipping her wine. Why are you suddenly so interested? He shrugged, masking his growing anger. Just trying to understand. You've been pretty secretive lately. Sophia rolled her eyes. Don't start. Andrew, I'm tired, and I don't need you playing detective. Andrew let it drop for now, but her defensive tone only confirmed what he already knew. Sophia had something to hide. The next day, Andrew went to work early, but his mind wasn't on his job. He spent his lunch break digging deeper into Sophia's activities. He called the florist who handled the gala's arrangements, posing as an event planner. The florist was eager to chat. Yes, we've got a massive order going out tomorrow. Sophia Blackwood placed it herself. Andrew's stomach turned. Blackwood? As in Gregory Blackwood. That's right, the florist replied cheerily. She's been coordinating everything with him. They make a great team. Andrew hung up, his grip on the phone tightening. Sophia and Gregory weren't just working together, they were intertwined. That evening, Andrew returned home earlier than usual. Sophia was in the dining room, surrounded by paperwork. She didn't look up as he entered, her pen moving swiftly across a sheet of paper. "Busy night?" he asked, his voice probing. "Always," she replied, not bothering to glance at him. Andrew approached the table, his eyes scanning the receipts and invoices. "Need any help?" Sophia laughed. A short, sharp sound. "You wouldn't know where to start?" Her dismissive tone stung, but Andrew kept his composure. "You're probably right," he said, retreating to the kitchen. As Sophia busied herself with her work, Andrew took her phone from the counter, scrolling quickly through her messages. Most were mundane. But one thread caught his attention. A series of texts with Gregory Blackwood. The exchanges were brief but intimate, filled with inside jokes and cryptic references to the big night. Andrew put the phone back just as Sophia walked into the kitchen. She glanced at him suspiciously, but said nothing, pouring herself another glass of wine. When he called Dominic later that night, his friend offered to help gather more evidence. "I know a guy who does security for high-end events," Dominic said. "He can get you access to the gala without Sophia knowing." "You'll need to see this with your own eyes, Andrew. Set it up." Andrew replied grimly. "I need to know everything." The night before the gala, Andrew mailed an anonymous letter to the charity's board of directors. The envelope contained evidence of the embezzlement, including photocopies of Sophia's FOIA's transactions and the discrepancies he'd uncovered. He sealed the envelope with a grim satisfaction. The trap was set. As Andrew sat alone in the darkened living room, he reflected on the plan he'd written out in his notebook. Every step was calculated, every move designed to corner Sophia and force the truth into the light. She thought she was in control, but she had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow at the gala, Andrew would be watching, and when the time was right, he would strike. The Blackwood Foundation Gala was the pinnacle of the city's social calendar, hosted in the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast an opulent glow over the room, illuminating marble floors and gilded walls. Attendees floated through the space, a sea of tailored suits and couture dresses. The atmosphere brimmed with wealth and pretense, the kind of place where secrets thrived under the guise of sophistication. Andrew stood in a shadowed balcony above the main hall, surveying the crowd like a predator watching its prey. He wore a tailored black suit, blending seamlessly into the high society crowd. Though his presence was anything but passive, Dominic's contact had provided him with an event staff badge that gave him access to the entire venue. His eyes tracked Sophia as she moved through the room, her black silk gown hugging her figure, drawing the attention of every man she passed. She was a vision of confidence, exuding of confidence, charm and grace as she mingled with donors and board members. But Andrew wasn't captivated by her beauty. He was hunting for cracks in her polished facade. Sophia's laughter rang out as she stood beside Gregory Blackwood near the bar. Gregory, a tall man with sharp features and the smug demeanor of someone used to getting what he wanted, leaned in close to whisper something in her ear. Sophia responded with a smile that was all too familiar to Andrew. It was the smile she once reserved for him. Andrew's hands tightened around the railing of the balcony. He had been right all along. She wasn't just lying, she was reveling in her deception. Hours earlier, Andrew had arrived at the hotel well before the event started. Andrew had arrived at the hotel well before the event started. With a small listening device disguised as a brooch, he had slipped unnoticed into the ballroom during setup. He strategically placed the device near the stage where Gregory would likely address the crowd. Another tiny camera, hidden in the intricate floral centerpiece on the VIP table, was already recording everything. By the time the gala began, Andrew was already 2 steps ahead. Dominic positioned himself near the entrance, dressed as security personnel, ready to intervene if needed. "I've got eyes on both of them," he murmured into his earpiece. "They're not being very subtle." From his vantage point, Andrew watched Sophia and Gregory closely. They were too comfortable with each other, their interactions laced with an intimacy that went beyond professional. When Sophia placed her hand lightly on Gregory's arm, laughing at something he said, Andrew felt the familiar stir of rage building in his chest. He moved downstairs, blending into the crowd with an ease. He wasn't here to confront them, not yet. He was here to gather irrefutable evidence. He needed Sophia to reveal herself. As the evening progressed, the gala reached its peak. Guests gathered near the stage as Gregory Blackwood took hold the microphone to address the crowd. His voice was smooth, charismatic as he spoke about the Foundation's mission and the importance of their contributions. Sophia stood nearby, her smile radiant as she basked in the shared spotlight, looked untouchable, a queen reigning over her domain. Andrew slipped closer, staying just outside the edge of the crowd. He didn't need to be seen yet. His time would come. The first crack appeared when a woman from the charity's finance team approached Gregory, whispering something in his ear. His confident expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. He nodded, waving her off, before resuming his speech. Andrew's lips curled into a cold smile. The anonymous tip had landed. The board was already investigating, and the seeds of doubt were being sown. After Gregory's speech, Sophia returned to mingling. But her movements were different now, more deliberate. Andrew watched as she exchanged hurried words with Gregory near the back of the room. She gestured toward a side door, and Gregory nodded, following her. Andrew moved quickly, slipping through the crowd unnoticed. He followed them at a distance, keeping to the shadows as they disappeared into a side corridor. His heart pounded, not with hesitation but with anticipation. The corridor was dimly lit, lined with doors leading to private lounges. Andrew found them in the last room, the door slightly ajar. He stood just out of sight, listening. "I told you we needed to handle this quietly," Sophia hissed, her voice sharp. "And I told you it wouldn't be a problem," Gregory replied, his tone equally tense. "The board's sniffing around because someone's feeding them information. We need to stick to the plan." Andrew's blood boiled at the casual arrogance in Gregory's voice. He stepped into the doorway, his presence filling the space like a shadow. "Plans falling apart, isn't it?" Andrew said, his voice low and cutting. Sophia's head snapped toward him, her eyes wide with shock. Gregory turned slowly, his smugness replaced with unease. "Who the hell are you?" Gregory demanded. Andrew stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. He ignored Gregory, his gaze locked on Sophia. "You didn't think I'd figure it out, did you?" Sophia recovered quickly, her expression hardening into defiance. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Andrew." "Don't I?" Andrew said, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen, playing back a snippet of Gregory and Sophia's earlier conversation, recorded by the listening device. Their words filled the room, undeniable evidence of their scheming. Gregory's face paled. "You son of a..." Andrew cut him off with a single step forward, his presence commanding. "Save it. I'm not here to listen to your excuses." Sophia's voice trembled. "With Andrew, what do you want, Andrew?" Andrew's smile was cold and devoid of humor. "I want to watch you fall." Back in the ballroom, Gregory and Sophia returned to the crowd, their composure forced but fragile. Andrew stayed in the shadows, watching as the board members began to circulate, their expressions tight with suspicion. The stage was set. The real performance was about to begin. Dominic approached Andrew, keeping his voice low. "The board members are on the move. Looks like they're getting ready to make a statement." "Good," Andrew replied. "Stay close. This is about to get interesting." The ballroom buzzed with the hum of conversation, the clink of champagne glasses punctuating the air. Andrew stood near the back, watching the scene unfold. The tension was evident, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. Noticed the subtle shifts in the crowd, the way whispers spread like wildfire. Eyes darting toward Sophia and Gregory. The seeds he had planted were beginning to bloom. Gregory stood near the stage, his confidence cracking under the weight of the board members' murmured question. Sophia hovered nearby, her face an unreadable mask, though Andrew could see the cracks in her composure. She clutched a flute of champagne like it was her lifeline, her eyes scanning the room for an escape. Andrew stepped forward, his calculated movements drawing him closer to the stage. He stopped near the edge of the crowd, just as one of the board members, a tall, sharp-featured woman named Eleanor Walsh, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor's voice cut through the chatter, commanding attention. "Before we proceed with tonight's festivities, there is an important matter we need to address." The room fell silent. Sophia froze, her knuckles white around her glass. Gregory shifted uncomfortably, his polished demeanor beginning to falter. Eleanor continued, her gaze sweeping the crowd. In light of recent information brought to our attention, we have uncovered significant discrepancies in the Foundation's financial record. A ripple of shock coursed through the audience. Andrew smirked, savoring the moment as Sophia's carefully curated image began to crumble. Eleanor turned her attention to Sophia, her voice sharp. "Sophia, as the event coordinator and a trusted member of our organization, we expect transparency and accountability. Would you care to address these discrepancies?" Sophia stepped forward, her smile brittle. "Of course, Eleanor. I can assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. Any discrepancies are likely due to clerical errors. I'll personally oversee an internal audit to clear this up." Andrew nearly laughed aloud at her audacity. Even now she clung to her lies with desperate resolve. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Clerical errors don't account for tens of thousands of dollars being diverted into a personal account." Her words hung in the air like a guillotine. The crowd erupted in whispers. Sophia's smile faltered, her mask slipping. I don't know what you're talking about." Eleanor nodded toward a man in the crowd, a member of the Foundation's financial team. He stepped forward, holding a folder. "The records are clear, Sophia. Transfers made directly to an account under your name. Would you like to explain?" Sophia's composure shattered. "This is absurd. You can't possibly believe I'd do something like this." Her voice rose, desperate and shrill. She turned to Gregory, her eyes pleading. "Gregory, tell them this is some kind of mistake." But Gregory didn't move to defend her. Instead, he took a step back, his expression cold. "I had no knowledge of these transfers," he said, his voice steady but laced with calculated detachment. "If Sophia was mishandling funds, she acted alone." The betrayal hit Sophia like a slap. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The crowd watched, enthralled by the unfolding drama. Andrew chose this moment to strike. He stepped forward, his presence commanding, and the crowd parted to let him through. All eyes turned to him as he approached the stage. "Shall we put an end to the lies?" Andrew's voice was calm but carried an edge that silenced the room. He held up his phone, turning it toward the large screen behind the stage. With a tap, a series of messages between Sophia and Gregory appeared, projected for everyone to see. The messages left nothing to the imagination: plans for siphoning money, intimate exchanges that spoke of their affair, dismissive remarks about the very donors they were supposed to serve. Gasps filled the room. Sophia's face went pale as she stared at the incriminating evidence. Gregory's cool facade cracked, his jaw tightening as his name and reputation burned on the screen. Andrew turned to the crowd, his voice sharp. "This is the truth of your trusted event coordinator and your CEO. Theft, deceit, and betrayal." Sophia tried to speak, but the words came out in a rush. "It's not what it looks like. This is a smear campaign. Someone's trying to frame me." But the crowd wasn't buying it. The whispers turned to murmurs. The murmurs to outright condemnation. Someone shouted, "Disgusting." Another voice added, "She betrayed all of us." Gregory, ever the opportunist, tried to salvage his own position. "I had no part in this." Sophia acted independently. "I'll cooperate fully with the investigation." Sophia whirled on him, her voice venomous. "You coward. Don't you dare throw me under the bus after everything." Andrew watched the chaos unfold with cold satisfaction. This was justice, not just for himself, but for everyone Sophia and Gregory had deceived. Dominic appeared at Andrew's side, his expression grim but approving. "Security's on their way. You did it, man. They're finished." As security approached to escort Sophia from the building, Andrew caught her gaze one last time. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of rage, despair, and something else. Fear. He leaned in close. Fear. He leaned in close. Enough for only her to hear. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? You brought this on yourself, Sophia." Sophia's voice was a whisper, trembling with fury. "You'll pay for this, Andrew." But Andrew just smirked, stepping back as the guards led her away. The queen had been dethroned, and there was no coming back from this. Gregory tried to slink away, but the board members closed in on him. Eleanor's icy voice rang out. "We'll be reviewing your position, Mr. Blackwood. Don't go far." Andrew left the gala without a backward glance, Dominic falling into step beside him. The air outside was crisp, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension of the ballroom. He inhaled deeply, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't over yet. There were still legal battles, and there were still legal battles. Divorce proceedings ahead, but tonight, he had won. Sophia and Gregory's empire of lies had crumbled, and Andrew had been the one to light the match. "You okay?" Dominic asked as they walked to their cars. "Better than okay," Andrew replied. "I finally have the truth." Andrew sat in the shadows of his living room, the cool steel of his wedding ring rolling between his fingers. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Sophia hadn't returned from the gala, nor had she called. She wouldn't. She had nowhere to go but down, and Andrew intended to make sure her fall was permanent. The day after the gala, news of Sophia and Gregory's scandal broke like a thunderclap. Social media erupted with posts and comments, and news outlets scrambled to cover the story. The leaked messages, the accusations of embezzlement, and the explosive scene at the event were too salacious to ignore. Andrew watched it all unfold from the comfort of his kitchen, sipping his coffee as headlines scrolled across his phone. Charity Queen exposed, embezzlement scandal, Rock's Blackwood Foundation CEO and event coordinator accused of fraud and illicit affair, high society betrayal. The gala that revealed it all, he smirked. Scrolling through the coverage, everything was going according to plan. That afternoon, Andrew met with his lawyer, a sharp and ruthless man named Harrison Wells. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit unwrinkled despite the long meeting. "This is a slam dunk," Harrison said, gesturing to the stack of evidence Andrew had provided. Between the messages, the financial records, and the public fallout, Sophia doesn't stand a chance. Filing for divorce with adultery and financial misconduct as grounds will put you in a strong position. Andrew nodded, his jaw tight. "I don't want strong. I want absolute. She doesn't get a dime, and I want her name buried." Harrison's smile was thin and cold. "Leave that to me." By the evening, Andrew was ready for the final phase of his revenge. He spent the afternoon combing through Sophia's messages again, pulling out the most damning ones to use in court. But there was one card he hadn't played yet. A video recording from the gala. The footage, captured discreetly by Andrew's hidden camera, shows Sophia and Gregory in the side room, their conversation filled with thinly veiled admissions of guilt and intimate familiarity. It was the nail in the coffin. Andrew uploaded the video to a private server, ready to release it if necessary. Dominic called to check in, his voice concerned but supportive. "How are you holding up? Need anything?" "I'm fine," Andrew assured him, "just waiting for the next move." "You know I've got your back," Dominic replied. "Whatever you need, just say the word." Sophia finally returned home late that night. She looked like a ghost of herself, her makeup smudged, her hair disheveled, her eyes red rimmed from tears. She walked into the living room and froze when she saw Andrew sitting in his armchair, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. "You're still up," she said, her voice hoarse. Andrew didn't respond immediately. He took a slow sip of his drink, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, he spoke, his tone low and measured. "Rough night." Sophia dropped her purse onto the couch and crossed her arms. "I don't need your sarcasm right now, Andrew," he chuckled darkly. "No, I suppose you need a miracle. Too bad I'm fresh out." She glared at him, her anger flaring. "Think you're so clever, don't you? Ruining my reputation, humiliating me in front of everyone. What did you even gain from this?" Andrew stood, his imposing frame towering over her. "I gained the truth, Sophia. I gained the satisfaction of watching you squirm. And most importantly, I gained my freedom." Her expression twisted into a sneer. "You're not innocent in this, Andrew. You drove me to this. You were always so controlling, so critical. I needed something more. I needed something more. And you found it in Gregory Blackwood." Andrew shot back, his voice rising. "You didn't just betray me, Sophia. You stole, you lied, and you disgraced yourself. Don't stand there and try to make this my fault." Sophia's composure cracked, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. What do you want?" "Andrew, an apology, a confession. You've already taken everything else." Andrew's eyes burned with cold fury. "I want you gone. I filed for divorce, and I'm making sure you don't get a penny from me." Her face paled. "You can't do that." "I can," Andrew said, stepping closer, "and I have. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you never crossed me." The next morning, Andrew sent the video to the foundation's board, ensuring Gregory's downfall was as complete as Sophia's. The board wasted no time issuing a public statement denouncing both Sophia and Gregory and announcing an independent audit of the foundation's finances. Gregory's resignation followed within hours. Andrew watched the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. Sophia and Gregory had built their empire on lies, and now it was crumbling beneath them. That evening, Andrew sat at his desk, staring at the empty space where his wedding photo used to sit. He slid his wedding ring into a small box and closed it. The final symbol of offs, and closed it. His broken marriage tucked away, his phone buzzed with a message from Harrison. "Divorce proceedings are in motion. Sophia has no leverage. It's a clean break." Andrew exhaled, a sense of closure settling over him. He stood, walking to the window. The city lights stretched out before him, a reminder that life moved on, even after betrayal. Sophia's fall was complete, and Andrew had reclaimed his power. Now he could finally move forward on his own terms. Andrew walked in terms. The courthouse, his footsteps echoing in the marble-floored hallway. The air was cold, the fluorescent lights harsh, but Andrew felt a strange sense of calm. Today was the final chapter of Sophia's downfall. The divorce proceedings had been expedited thanks to the overwhelming evidence of her infidelity and fraud. Andrew's lawyer, Harrison Wells, had ensured everything was airtight. Sophia was already seated at the defendant's table when Andrew entered. She looked diminished, her once impeccable appearance now haggard. Her lawyer, a nervous man with thinning hair, shuffled papers frantically. Dominic slipped into the courtroom, taking a seat behind Andrew in silent support. The proceedings were swift and devastating for Sophia. The evidence against her was irrefutable. Bank records, text messages, witness statements. Her attempts to portray herself as a victim fell flat against the mountain of proof Andrew had amassed. The judge's ruling was clear. Andrew was granted the divorce on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. Sophia received nothing, no alimony, no property, not even her personal belongings from their shared home. Her counterclaims were dismissed. Reputation in tatters. As they left the courtroom, Sophia tried one last desperate plea. "Andrew, please. I have nothing left." Andrew paused, turning to face her. "You had everything. Sophia away for what? Money. A thrill. Was it worth it?" She had no answer, only tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, Sophia," Andrew said, walking away without looking back. Meanwhile, Andrew ensured the embezzled funds were returned to the foundation through Harrison. He facilitated the foundation transfer anonymously, careful to keep his involvement private. The board issued a statement thanking an unnamed donor for their generosity. But Andrew didn't care about recognition. He cared about setting things right. Weeks later, Andrew stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The city sprawled out before him, glittering with life. For the first time in months, he felt at peace. The divorce had been finalized, the stolen money returned, and Sophia's web of lies dismantled. She was facing criminal charges and public disgrace, her life unraveling just as she had tried to unravel his. Dominic joined him on the balcony, leaning against the railing. "You did it, man. It's Sophia's web. Finally over." "Yeah." Andrew nodded, taking a sip of his whiskey. "Thanks for being there. What are friends for?" Dominic replied. "So what's next for you?" That evening, Andrew attended a small charity event for veterans, a cause close to his heart. As he mingled with the guests, he found himself drawn into a conversation with a woman named Cassandra. She was poised, intelligent, and refreshingly genuine. A stark contrast to the manipulative charm Sophia had wielded. By the end of the evening, Andrew felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. He exchanged numbers with Cassandra, leaving the event with a renewed sense of purpose. Sophia, meanwhile, had retreated to a rented apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her once glamorous life was a distant memory, replaced by legal battles and endless questions from reporters. She was a pariah, her name synonymous with scandal Andrew didn't think of her often, but when he did, it was with a cold detachment. She had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. The story ended not with forgiveness but with justice. Andrew had reclaimed his dignity, restored what Sophia had tried to destroy, and emerged stronger for it. He was no longer the man who had been betrayed. He was a man who had faced betrayal and conquered it. And as he stood on his balcony that night, the cool breeze brushing against his face, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of a new chapter, one written entirely on his terms. Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.